I spent the day with a 2-year-old. It's now 4:45 and I am about to pass out on camera. Hey Booktube, it's Kim at Middle of the Bookmarch, and this is my Bookish week for Sunday, September 15th. And it was only because Friday was the 13th that I know the date. My teenager and I spent the entire day with my 2-year-old granddaughter, and we had a blast. But I am wiped out. Her mom, my daughter, is at a retreat, a ladies' retreat for the weekend, and her husband, my son-in-law, was out for the day at his church doing, he is the pastor there, and he was doing some work for a craft and bake sale. So we took the baby for the day. We took her to IHOP for French toast sticks, which she did not eat, and a pile of bananas and strawberries, which she did, which I am completely happy with. And then we went home and we played and we watched, what did we watch? We watched Moana, that's her favorite movie. And then it was lunchtime and nap time. We took the dog for a walk. We walked outside. It was gorgeous. She took her nap. We gave her a half-hour-long bath. She got all pruny. And her dad came home, and we just got home about 4:30-ish, and I'm about to pass out. I even took a nap while she was napping. Oh, I am so tired. But we had the best day. She is so fun and so talkative and so smart and funny. We just had so much fun. So yeah, it was the best day. The best day. And by the time you're watching this, I'll be spending more time with her at church on Sunday morning and just loving the Grammy weekend. But along with her, I am here to talk about the books that I read last week and the books that I'm currently reading, so let's get to that. The first book that I finished is The Queen of Dirt Island by Donald Ryan. I loved this book. This is the story of 4 generations of women, the Aylward women of Nina Tipperary. And this is, what is her name? Saoirse. I should remember that because Saoirse Ronan. Her name is Saoirse. In the very beginning, it says she was born, and therein begins the story. Because Saoirse is born to a loving mother and a loving father who very quickly dies on her, I believe, her second day of life or within the first week of her life. Her father is killed in a car accident, not of his fault. And she still has her loving mother and her paternal grandmother, and her paternal grandmother and her mother become best friends, thick as thieves, and eventually the paternal grandmother moves in with them, and they are their own family of women. And this book is made up of extremely short chapters and vignettes into the lives of this female family. And it is beautifully written. It is tied together from short chapter to short chapter. There are family dynamics and other family characters that come into the story. And the generations of women in the Aylward family continues to grow. And it is so powerful when Ryan is writing about family and love and the strength of women. It is so powerful when he's talking about the memories of a young woman, of a girl, and going into teenager years, becoming a young woman, having a baby. It is just so powerfully written by this very talented gentleman writer, and writing about a family of women. And not to sound cynical with that, but I was very impressed. And oh goodness gracious, that's a squeaky cat over there. And I was very impressed by it, and I absolutely love his writing. There is some definite plot elements here, but overall, this is an overarching story of the generational growth and the generational years of these women's lives, and it's just a beautifully written book. I absolutely loved it. So happy I read it. Now, the audiobook that I finished is called Cultish by Amanda Montell, and it's a nonfiction book about cult phenomena or cult thinking. And she, I believe, she or her family were part of the Children of God cult. I don't remember. And that's typically what happens to me when I listen to a book on audio. I don't retain it always the same way as I do a book in print. But it was good. And it started off very strong because what she talked about is she was giving us the reminders of the larger cult stories that we've heard in the news. Jonestown and what happened in Jonestown and Jim Jones, Heaven's Gate, the Moonies. There were a few others. There was one, Nexium. No. There was a few others that were pretty well known. I don't think she talked a lot about the Branch Davidians in Waco, Texas. So if you're unfamiliar with any of these, they are mostly centered around American cult phenomena. Scientology, she goes on at length about Scientology, which is interesting. And so she does talk a lot about those big, well-known, negative, terrorizing cult phenomena. And what happens to people that are attracted to groups like that? What happens with their lives? What do they surrender? What do they relinquish or give up to be invested in a cult? And how does that change a person? And how does that change a person's relationship with themselves and with their families? And ultimately, many of these cults either encourage suicide or people just followed these absolute psychopathic maniacs to their deaths. So it's just absolutely horrifying to listen to. The last half of the book, though, it gets a lot weaker, and she starts to go off the rails a little bit because now she's talking about CrossFit and multi-level marketing and pyramid schemes and Mary Kay Cosmetics and Amway or Tupperware, and then CrossFit and different other kind of fitness groups and that type of thing. And she devotes a lot of time to that, almost as much as she devoted to the actual cults that she was reporting on, which is fine. The book is cult-ish. I get it. But it did feel to me like she was writing a book about how much she hates direct level marketing and CrossFit than how much she hated what happened at Jonestown. So it wasn't clear what her focus was supposed to be by the time I finished the book. But she does give a lot of really good information. I learned a lot about different types of people who get involved in cults or can't get out of cults, or the ones who do. So that was really interesting. And it was really interesting to hear some of the realities of some of the tragedies that happened to people who followed some of these charismatic cult leaders. So that was all very interesting stuff. The book wasn't perfect for me, but yeah, it was good. The other two books I finished, thank you to Shorty September. These were collections of poetry, and I just recently hauled these, and I finished both of these. I hauled 5 poetry collections, and I read 2 already. The first one is Requeening by Amanda Moore. Love this cover. Amanda Moore is a poet, and she is a teacher, literature teacher, I believe, in high school English. She was a new mother and a cancer patient and a beekeeper. So this poetry collection, a lot of it has to do with beekeeping and what she's learned about bees in general and how that applies to life for any of us humans. The dynamics of beekeeping, the dynamics of bees as a community. So that's all really interesting stuff. The poems that were focused on bees and beekeeping, I absolutely loved. They were beautiful. A lot of the book also, she's talking about motherhood and being a new mom to a newborn, and a mother in general, motherhood. And then a lot of the other poems are having to do with her illness, cancer, and the illness of her mother. And there's a lot of maternal focus on a lot of the poetry in the collection. So not all of it was my favorite. My favorites were the poems around beekeeping and bees. and the communities and what she learned and how she applied any of that to her life. And you can see the ties. You can see the ties between poetry on bees and beehive communities and motherhood and family and parenthood. So you can see all those connections. But I have to say, I read a lot of the poems on motherhood, or especially new motherhood. And I thought, I've heard all this before, or I've read all this before. And I'm going to admit this about myself. I tend to be a very cynical person when it comes to kind of that, I don't know what I'm trying to say, that the thoughts about motherhood and saying things, trying to put to words these intense emotions that you feel without sounding trite. And unfortunately, I think some of these felt that way. They felt stereotypical when I read them. But the collection on a whole, I really did enjoy. And I think she's a very good poet. She's very talented. And I do recommend this one, especially if you're a bee lover, if you're a young woman or a young mom, you might really love this. There's some difficult poems to read. There's some difficult poems about her relationship with her young daughter, even as a baby and as a young child. But ultimately, the poems are about love and family. And I really, really did like that one. And I'm not an intense poetry reader. So when I read a collection, normally I go into it feeling like I'm going to feel so stupid. I'm not going to understand any of these. I'm going to feel like a moron. This book is going to make me feel like an idiot. But it didn't, and I really did like it. This one I liked even more. And I did not feel stupid, and I did not feel like a moron. This is Blood Lyrics by Katie Ford. This one is also about motherhood, but on a different focus. She was the mother of a micro-preemie who she and her partner didn't know if her daughter was going to survive. And these poems were breathtaking to read, and I could feel the angst, and I could feel the terror of not knowing if your child was going to live or not. And that was very obvious. The tone of Ford's poems are very different than Moore's poems. Ford's poems are extremely frazzled and raw and very painful to read. And you're scared along with her as the mother of a micro-preemie and as a writer. And then she's talking about her daughter, the medical establishment, what her daughter's body was doing or what it was supposed to do, and they weren't sure if it was going to be able to do. And then you got through some of those beginning poems, and all of a sudden she starts talking about war. And she's writing about battles and violence and blood. And I'm like, wait a minute, this collection turned. Where did it turn, and what did I miss? I think I missed something. But by the very end of the book, by the very last poem, it all ties together, and I thought this was brilliant. This is genius. And she brought it around for me because in the very beginning, simply by the quality of her writing, I had been rating this book extremely high. And in the middle, I started to go off course, not knowing how I was going to think about this collection. And at the end, I just thought she was a genius. So I definitely recommend this one. Again, this is difficult to read in a lot of different places. Her style is extremely powerful. Her choice of words, I thought, was so beautiful. The words that she put together in her form, I just thought, this is so pretty, and it's so powerful and emotional, and I just absolutely loved this one. Loved that collection. That is it. Those are the 4 books I finished last week. Thank you, Shorty September, for having me finish 4. I've got a couple more shorties on the go that I will finish this week. Hopefully I'll finish the same amount. And normally it doesn't matter how many books I finish. It doesn't matter how many books anybody finishes in a week. But I always think it's super fun to see how many I can do, especially in Shorty September. What am I currently reading? I have to get the book that fell off my lap a minute ago. I am currently reading 3 books. This one, Death Comes for the Archbishop by Willa Cather. I will be done with this by the time you see this video. And I am buddy reading this with Britta, and this is a reread for me. This is Willa Cather's book about 2 French priests who are sent on mission work to New Mexico in the U.S. in the 1800s. 1848. Yeah, who would want to go there in 1848? There's nothing out there. It's desert. It's desert with native people and Mexican people, and they're sending French priests out there. What are they doing that for? Colonialism, people, and religious mission work. Neither of which I really are fond of or agree with. But that's what the book is about. And as far as I remember, it's based on true, actual priests. Don't know their names, but this is I think this is the first Willa Cather book I ever read many years ago. It's a beautiful book. And there's a lot of talk in here of religion and of fanaticism and missionary work. So if that truly bothers you, it's probably not the best book for you. The language is beautiful. Her writing is gorgeous. Cather's description of setting and landscape is phenomenal. And this book highlights that. It magnifies it beautifully. It is very religious in tone, but the characters themselves are incredibly faithful yet respectful men who meet all kinds of believers who believe in all kinds of things. And even though they do want to spread the Catholic gospel, they do see the different belief systems of people in the southern United States in these times. And there's a lot of understanding there, and there's a lot of not just acceptance, but patience with these people, because they're not the type of zealous missionaries who want to proselytize and convert 100%. They have a deep respect for these people's traditional beliefs. So that I like to see. But we'll be done with this by the time you're watching the video and have a full wrap up in my next Bookish week. I am listening to a book called The Spell Shopped by Sarah Beth Durst. This is a super magical, cozy audiobook about a magical librarian and her magical companion, a talking spider plant. And the place where they live, the magical world that they live in, she is a librarian, and they are in charge of curating this library of spell books. And the library is burned to the ground. And they escape by gathering as many crates of books as they can, and they can only get 4 or 5 onto a sailboat. And they sail away to the island that this librarian lived in with her parents, who are now gone. And she comes upon the island and finds her abandoned, broken down, deserted family cottage, and she moves back into it and tries to figure out how to rebuild her life with her spider plant companion. This is super sweet so far. It's my audiobook I'm listening to in the car, and I will have more when I finish it next weekend. And the other book, the third book I'm currently reading, is World of Wonders by Amy Nezhukumatathil. I believe I got that right. Amy Nezhukumatathil. This is a memoir of the natural world, but of her life as a young girl with her parents. Her parents are Philippine immigrants, I believe. Filipino immigrants. Her mother was a doctor in a psychiatric hospital in, the Alabama or the South somewhere, when the author was a young girl. And she it's a collection of essays about plants and animals in their natural habitats and her observations, but she also tells us, the readers, about her family and her life. And it's beautifully done. She's a poet, and it's so beautifully written, and this is another shorty that I expect to be done with during this week. That is it for me. So let me know what you think of any of the books I just showed you or talked about. Let me know if you've read anything good for Shorty September, and I will see you all in the next video. Bye, everybody.